Yeah, so my name is Arturo Castro. I come from Berlin. I'm based in Berlin right now, but I'm from Spain. And yes, Natalia said, I think I'm an artist, an engineer. I also work as an educator, doing workshops like the one that we are doing here. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about the work that I've been doing during the last 10, 12 years in the field of interactive installations, art with technology. So the first project I'm going to show, it's from 2006. It was really, it's kind of nothing really special today because there's like so many video mapping projects out there. And back then it was kind of something not so seen or so common. And it was a project in Perugia, in Italy. Perugia is this city in Italy that has a really special place because it's they have kind of this underground city. So below the real city, they have this like 2,000-year-old city. Nobody lives there anymore, of course. But there's kind of cultural places, shops. And we did this project that consisted of a model of the city. That's like the real city, the one that is over the ground. And on top of that, we were projecting images taken from maps, from archives of how the city was during different eras. So through projection, we could show how the city evolved. It was kind of primitive, the way that we were working, because back then we didn't knew very well how to do this. So we were like, here you see Matteo Ferroni, that is the guy who I work with in this project. And he was there like painting with Photoshop one of the buildings that we wanted to show, like that one in blue. Sorry for the bad quality of these images. The rest of them will be better. It's kind of one of the oldest projects I've worked in. So yeah, we were like painting them by hand, and yeah. So there was a camera, and the installation was interactive. You can like activate some things when passing your hand over it. We also didn't knew very well about these kind of techniques about computer vision, so we were doing things kind of in weird ways, like trying to know how the light in the room will change to detect to see how the camera should behave, etc. And yeah. The next project is Grand Mutual Smiles. This is a project I worked with Pierre Prosk, who is also an artist from Australia. And he actually had the idea for the project, and I collaborated with him. And the idea was based on, in Bhutan, in this Asian country, the president of Bhutan, at some point during the 80s, if I remember well, he was kind of questioned by Western journalists about why, because they had politics in which they weren't allowing some things, like they only allowed television, for example, at the end of the 80s or something like that, or cars or stuff like that. So he was kind of pressured to allow that. And in his answer, he kind of coined this term where he talked about happiness, interior product of happiness. I don't remember exactly the name right now. But it was related. It was kind of this word game with economic terms, but based on happiness. His point was that he wasn't so interested in making his country richer or more economically like work economically better, but he wanted to make people living in his country more happy. And so this project kind of comes from this point, this term. And what we did is we connected two countries, Austria in Linz. Sorry. So we connected two countries, Austria, the city of Linz, where the Ars Electronica Festival happens every year, and the capital of Bhutan. And as I said, there's really high restrictions about technology and stuff like that in Bhutan. So the kind of connections that we had, like the internet connection that we had, was really restrictive. Like we couldn't send like something like video online. Back in 2006, it wasn't so common either to do like teleconference through video. So we came up with this idea of actually sending smiles from one part of the world to the other. So people will approach the installation, and when you smile, the installation will detect smiles and take you a picture, and it will send you smiles from one part, from one city to the other. So it was kind of creating this way of communication through smiles, right? And people in Austria will get smiles from Bhutan, and people from Bhutan will get smiles from Austria. So it was kind of this non-verbal communication based somehow on happiness. I think that was the president or something like that. I don't remember exactly who he was. This is kind of the technical setup. Well, we had a camera, and there was a computer with some computer vision algorithms that were detecting smiles and well, sending this from one city to another. The next project is kind of totally different. It's a project that I worked for a long time when I was living in Barcelona before moving to Berlin. I worked for 3 years at a company called Reactable Systems. Reactable, well, I'm going to show the video and then I'll tell about it. So Reactable is a project that started at the university in Barcelona, at the Universitat Pompeu Fabra. There's a group in this university that do research around sound, music, and this is so they at the university for 5 years they were developing this as a research project. The idea came from this thing that happens, probably not so much anymore, but with electronic music, the way that you usually see electronic music is usually someone behind a laptop doing stuff that you don't know what's going on, or some DJ, or in general, you cannot see anymore any kind of performance, or there's no, like, it kind of loses the visual aspect that music, live music always had, right? Like if you go to a rock concert, there's someone playing guitar, playing the drums, and it's kind of, it has a visual component to it. Or even if you go to a musical, classic music concert, there's the orchestra, and they are playing lots of different instruments. So there's been always this kind of visual aspect to music that is kind of lost with electronic music. That's why most electronic music concerts have visuals, for example, right? Like visuals make sense because the musician or the musicians are not really doing anything that is very noticeable. So the idea behind Reactable is kind of bringing back this visual aspect of music to electronic music. And the way to do that was through kind of data visualization, we might say. In this case, music visualization, right? All that you can see in the... So these blocks here, these kind of plastic blocks, have a symbol below. And when you put them on the table, there's a camera that detects that symbol and creates, so each of them represents an instrument, not an instrument, but sound generators, filters, etc. And all you can see there is actually representation of the music that you might be listening. Like these lines that connect each block to the center are really the sound wave that you are listening to. There's other controls that represent the volume or the intensity of the effect that you are applying to that sound wave, etc. You can also control some of these blocks. You can control them by touching the screen. So it's also kind of a multi-touch screen. And yeah, so I was working for 3 years with these guys. Once they finished their research project in the university, they started a company to actually make a commercial product out of this, and we've developed this the commercial version of it. The next project is called the Advertiser. The Advertiser is the project that we are working on these days here in Strelka Institute. We are doing a workshop about it. Well, I'll show the video. And So, well, yeah, the Advertiser is this augmented reality device. You have seen these binoculars. The idea is that you look through them and you can like substitute advertisements with art. The motivation behind it is to kind of take advantage of this kind of like publicity is something that is super invasive and is all over the place in big cities. So why not take that and use it as a positive space for our art, right? And well, there's so we do these workshops where people come and we work on this kind of modifications of publicity, critical points of view, artworks. And that's what we are doing here. On Saturday, we will do some excursions to show what people have been working on. So if you are interested, you should come. Yeah, well, this project is it was started by Julian Oliver and Damien Stewart, artists from New Zealand. I've been collaborating with them since like, I don't know, 3 years ago or something like that. The next project, well, video. Yeah, so this is something that I started as an experiment. I work in this project, and most of the projects that you've seen are done with this tool that I work in. I work in this project called Open Frameworks, which is an open source toolkit for artists and designers. And most of the projects that you've seen, almost all of them here, are done with this software. It is also kind of a community of people working on art, technology. And sometimes it happens that some ideas, someone finds some software or begins to work with some ideas, and that kind of spreads. So by then, there were people already working with face detection, like someone found this library that worked really well for face detection, and I was kind of experimenting with it one afternoon and did this, and so I uploaded it on internet, and it kind of went viral. Like next day there were like 1 million visits or something like that, completely unexpected, and it happens something interesting that happens sometimes with this kind of work or with artistic work. In like nowadays, and is that sometimes the reaction to some work becomes somehow the artwork itself. Like in this case, there were people like, it's kind of funny, sometimes it's kind of scary, but there were people that had this reaction about it being scary, not because of the visual aspect, but because of how image, like digital image, is not reliable anymore, right? Like if someone at his home, like some nobody at his home can do this, like switch your face in real time, what can do the media, right? Or like a big studio. So somehow that kind of scared people, and there were lots of reaction and lots of commentary about that, about how digital image is not reliable, at how well, all these kind of things, and that kind of became the topic of or one of the most interesting topics for me about this this piece. I then collaborated with an artist from the United States, Cal McDonnell, and we turned it into an interactive installation that has been exhibited in several places. I think it was here in Moscow too, some months ago. And the next project is a project called, sorry. It's a project called Scanneramic. And Scanneramic is an attempt to kind of have a full travel by train in only one picture. So what you see here is only a small part because it's like you cannot really see the whole thing in a screen. And what we did, this is a project that I did with Carolina Romano, who is here. And what we did is that when we travel by train, we would take this tablet, like Android device with us, and we would put it in the window of the train, and we'll kind of scan the landscape. Because the way this works, it's a technique called slit scan, which is really used and it's like super common. And it consists of taking one line each frame. Like if you take a video, instead of getting the full frame, you get just one vertical line. And that gives this kind of aesthetic where things seems like if you pass the landscape through a flatbed scanner. So yeah, this is Japan, I think. And yeah, so we have like 1 hour long travels by train that are one really long photograph. We haven't had the opportunity yet to print this and exhibit it properly. We have a web page where we have all the images, but the final idea would be to actually print this and so you are able to see the whole travel in only one image. And the last project I'm going to talk about is a project I'm working on right now. So this is a project that started as a research at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. And there's, in one of the research groups there's a technologist called Seth Hunter who was researching about the possibilities of communicating through the internet, how to engage people more when you are communicating through the internet, mostly oriented to families where, for example, fathers will be traveling. So from their studies, like children have problems to communicate through something like Skype. They lose interest when seeing just an image in a screen. Like they won't talk that much, or they won't engage in conversation through this medium. So the research, the idea was to create some kind of virtual world where you can play together, even if you are not in the same place. It is not really something like virtual reality, but it's kind of related. And the idea is that you will be in this same virtual space, having some kind of role-playing where both people will engage in, I don't know, playing with children. Children usually create this world. They draw the elements that they want to play with, and then they can position them in the space. They can make themselves grow and look like giants. That's something that in the original research the kids do a lot. Like they grow themselves a lot, and their parents are super small, and that will that they will find that super fun. So it's a way for them. It's a way to make this kind of communication online a little bit more natural or more engaging, or in this case, oriented for children. What I've been doing with SED is kind of making the software that they had a little better. So we are using these cameras called Kinect, this device from Microsoft that you can, is used usually in the Xbox, this games console. And it's actually, even if they use it for video games, it is actually a kind of a 3D camera. So we can actually 3D scan in real time the scene. And there you can see, well, I'm in Berlin, he's in San Francisco. And we are kind of in this virtual space. The final thing is not going to look like this. This is just some test that we've been doing lately. And there's this weird effect because the Kinect only has, like you cannot go farther than half meter. Like if you go farther than half meter, it won't recognize you. So there's this weird moment where we will try to touch each other, but we cannot because of this limitation of the hardware. And it's kind of, it was something accidental, but it was kind of a really nice metaphor of what was going on, right? Like we have this technology, but it's almost there, but no, you cannot, right? And it was kind of a nice moment when that happened. So we are using these cameras, and right now we've been developing some compression algorithms for sending depth. There's lots of compression algorithms right now for sending video because that's something super used. But there's none for sending 3D, this kind of 3D information through the internet. So we've been working on developing some kind of algorithm that allows us to send this over a normal internet connection and in sync with sound, and also some kind of metadata that we use to somehow cut out silhouettes of people, so you can do this like role playing by introducing yourself in these kind of virtual worlds and eliminate the rest of the real scene. This is also being used right now in another research project between MIT and an institute in Japan. And the idea is pretty much the same, but in their case, they are using it for language learning. So, for example, there might be someone in Japan and someone here in Moscow, and you will create something like, I don't know, let's say a grocery store, and both of you will be in this virtual grocery store doing this role playing, like, well, I'm selling you some tomatoes and doing all of this in Japanese. So you can learn this way. You can learn Japanese with native Japanese, or the other way around. And and yeah, it's kind of a work in progress. We still have some technical problems, and we still have to refine mostly the how, like, all the user interface and all, because it's still pretty technical. But most of the compression and all the, like, the more raw stuff is already working pretty well. And yeah, to finish. So most of, I think my work is kind of very eclectic. Like, I've been doing commercial stuff and more like political or social involved stuff, things like this kind of research project. What might be like the nexus that is common to all of my work, I think, is the way I work in these projects. I try at least to work with open source always, to share all the code that I do. So for all the projects that you've seen, probably the oldest ones are not even online anymore because they were a mess. It's really not even like something useful. But for the rest of them, you can find the code online, and anyone can use it and reuse it and create new things from them. And I find that one of the most important aspects of the work I do, right? Like being able to inspire other people through, not only through seeing what I do, but also through being able to get what I do and transform it into something else, or learn how to do these kind of things. I think that's one of the most important things of my work. So yeah, I think that's it. And I don't know if there's any questions, perhaps. And yeah, so thanks.